Welcome to the Family Business Audiocast on LinkedIn. I am R. Adam Smith, creator of this audiocast series. As an entrepreneur, investor, founder, investment banker, and board leader the last 25 years, I'm fortunate for my many experiences within the family firm industry. A warm thank you to our live audience on LinkedIn today and for those listening in the future. A brief comment on why I created this broadcast. Private companies are a passion of mine, having grown up in a family of entrepreneurs and having engaged for 2 decades in deals, strategic transformations, investments, and boards with an array of fascinating family enterprises, family firms, and family offices. I founded this series to offer a useful platform for listeners to hear from veterans, academics, and leaders in the vast family firm ecosystem. Whether you're a family business owner, building, running, or advising a family office, or just expanding your family office activities, I hope these conversations are useful and enlightening. And now it's time to turn our attention to our accomplished guests on today's episode. Today, I'm pleased to host Laura Gambineri here with us on the Family Business Audiocast. Laura, it's great to have you.
Thank you so much, Adam. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to make it on and look forward to getting to know you better. And now I'm going to talk a bit about you and your bio. So, Laura Nanette Gambineri-Giese is a leading expert in cross-border estate planning as well as elite private placement life insurance. And then also she works in family governance. She is the founder of Trusted Governance, and also she works at Crown Global Insurance Group. She works with ultra net worth individuals and their advisors to design sophisticated wealth structuring strategies that are both global compliant and deeply personal and customized. With a focus on clients in the US and the UK primarily, Laura brings a nuanced understanding of regulatory, cultural, and family dynamics to her work. She is a trust and estate practitioner with advanced STEP certifications in family business advising and governance. And Laura is known for aligning technical precision with value-based planning. Through her work, Laura empowers families and family offices to preserve wealth across generations while also fostering clarity, continuity, and shared purpose. That's fantastic. We're really great to have you here today, Laura. Why don't we talk a little bit about what you do initially and tell us a bit about trusted governance as well, and then we'll dig into some dialogue.
Sure. Thank you so much for the great introduction. I think couldn't have been done any better. I have been working in the private placement life insurance industry for over a decade now. I work together with my father in a team and some others, so it's almost a little family business. And through this, we have been establishing trusted relationships with many of our families that we work with in the high net worth and ultra high net worth space. And from there, really, we noticed that once you have accumulated a certain wealth as a family or as an individual, you have a lot of doors that are opening for you. The service providers come to you from every angle. Everyone has the best solution, the best structure for you. But what is very often missing is the emotional part. Behind closed doors, we still see a lot of fighting, especially when it comes to inheritance and estates, when someone has passed away. And I love families. I love working with families, and I always found it quite sad to see that a lot of these fights could have been avoided if there would have been better communication prior. And that's what led me to going into family governance several years ago, and then later on establishing trusted governance.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. It's a vast industry now, especially in Europe, where the family office structure and the bigger family enterprises have been building for centuries. I think the US and Southeast Asia are catching up now, but in Europe, it's quite a typical thing to have multi-generational families and family offices in Europe, especially in or around Switzerland or Liechtenstein. Tell us about that. That's the Switzerland ecosystem briefly in terms of the larger families.
I think, like you said, there's a lot of structuring involved here, not just in Switzerland, but in the EU or probably in continental Europe, particularly in civil law countries. You have an approach that because we have certain legal frameworks, we can do a lot of things. For example, we can work with foundations, but we have a lot of complicated legal frameworks in place. We've got forced heirship rules or limited recognition of trusts that can make it sometimes a bit more complex on the planning side. So I think here in Europe, what we see a lot, and it's also in Switzerland, is that families very much rely on informal structures and very much on centralized leadership, especially in the first generation. But family governance is becoming bigger and more formal, I think, over the years now. I think the term family governance in itself, however, is still very much too formal for a lot of families. But like you said, there's a lot of family offices that are being established or have been established already years ago over generations, and they are working on their own terms, trying to support continuity, fairness, and really long-term vision with these families.
Yeah, for sure. It's a delicate balance between the inter organizational dynamics with culture and the knowledge of certain structuring and best practices, but then like also the urgency or the willingness to make tricky decisions legally or structuring and preparing for next gen. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of planning. I mean, you sit at the intersection of this product design of insurance and also these dynamics of the family. So talk a bit about that. Like you're balancing the technical rigors required in the structuring, but also the interpersonal relationships. So the owners of the family can come together with agreements.
I think that's a very good question or good point, because you always want to look at the intersection of product design and the family dynamics, right? The technical side are things like ownership structures, control, access. They really solve the what and the how, whilst governance is more what answers the why and the who in a family. And if you skip that part on the governance side, even the most technical, perfect structure could fall apart. So we always start with the family. We ask about their goals, their values, how they make decisions, how they communicate now. And once we understand that, we can reverse engineer the technical structure to support these kind of dynamics, not the other way around. We also try to build in flexibility, because families evolve and they change over time. So what works today may not work in 5 years or in the future, especially when the new generations step in. And very often, we or I find myself almost acting as a translator. So we speak to the legal and the tax teams, trying to understand the family's real needs and then translating in between, helping the family understand what this structurally actually means to them and how it can benefit them in the future, and vice versa.
That's great. As you know, I work extensively in single family office structuring and alternative investing, but also previously in mergers and acquisitions, and often very involved in the pre-sale planning or larger financings. And there's a lot of preparation around the wealth planning and the trust before those transactions occur. So for trusted governance, you founded the company to support families in the governance design. Um, so, like, what does that mean these days in the design of governance, and I guess how do you infuse the technical wealth structuring into the governance, so that you're protecting, helping your clients protect the wealth, especially as they're moving into a large transaction, let's say, in that context.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I mean, if we think in theory, right, you would say that these work hand in hand, the governance and the technical structuring. Governance sets the direction, like I said, who's involved, what are the values, how designs get made, and the structuring is there to support that with the right tools. In practice, and you've probably seen this as well, they are very much often handled in silos. you've got the lawyers or the tax advisors really focused on efficiency and effective, efficient structures. And the family is trying to focus on trust, on fairness, on relationships between the generations or between the different individuals. And then when these two sides don't connect, it creates the problem. Structures can become too rigid. Family members might feel excluded, or there's a mismatch between the legal ownership and the perceived roles. Like, oh, I own these shares, but I have no idea what I'm actually supposed to do with them, right? And that's then where we as trusted governance try to step in. We try to bridge these two worlds. We make sure that the structures really reflect the family's intent and not just the tax code. So we facilitate conversations, we clarify roles with them, we connect the dots between, trustee appointments, voting rights, things like family charters, councils. It really gets down to sitting down with each individual of a family, really understanding them, what keeps them up at night, and then bringing the family together. And if that is done right, then the structure becomes a platform for good governance and not a barrier to it.
Nice. That's good. And these projects can take months or a year, no? Like what is
Oh, yeah.
the range of planning for the complicated families? Let's say a more complicated family. Give us an example or framework of that. Let's say multi-generational, G1, G2. Let's say there's a large illiquid asset. Could be a cross-border company. There's different domiciles. There's different tax and estate planning. There's waterfall distributions. There's multiple children. There's children in the company. There's children outside of the company. There might be a former wife or husband. So let's say a more complicated. Walk us through that the range of that project on the more complex side for a couple minutes.
It can get really complex, like you said. The more members that you have in a family, the longer it takes. It's funny because initially when you start working with a family, very often they try to set a timeline. They say, I want to get this done in 3 months, or let's get this done by the end of the year. I want to get this out of the way. And a lot of them don't understand initially how much work actually goes into this. And there's different factors involved. Of course, not every family member is always in the right headspace to have these deep conversations, to have these interviews. So on one side, you have to keep it professional. You need to make appointments. You need to make sure that really everyone is committed. But on the other side, you also need to be flexible. There's things that can come up, family events, sicknesses, illnesses, trauma, you name it, vacation. And then people need time to prepare for these things. They need to reflect. I usually say don't expect any real changes before working for 12 or 18 months. And then these projects are really meant for a lifetime. So it's not about me holding their hands for the rest of their lives, because I don't have the time for that either. But it's really trying to make plans that work with the family, and these plans need to be revisited ever so often. May
Let's
it be
talk.
because, yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about that revisiting. So let's say the structuring around the illiquidity, moving to liquidity, or restructuring the multi-generational planning and the children and trust and estates and allocations and let's say the private banking side. Let's say that's all it comes to some form of agreement. So then what happens after that in terms of tracking and reporting for, let's say, elite tax and planning and estate advisors like insurance advisors like yourself on an ongoing basis? What does the family need on a regular basis to keep everything organized and working properly?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the individual family, but on general terms, we try to say each family should probably, if they have large investments that are performance based, that may change with stock markets and how things are going. Like right now, there's a lot of up and down, there's a lot of volatility. You probably want to sit down every quarter or so with a few people of the family that view these numbers, that are on top of it. But generally speaking, the plans do need to be revisited often. What works today is not going to work in the future. You've got changing regulations, right? Whether that's CRS or global minimum taxes, you've got people changing their residencies. You've got things like the UK that just abolished the non-dom regime. So on one side, you can say, okay, let's meet up once a year and make sure, are we still aligned with our values? Are the goals still the same? Are we still on track with everything more or less? But then there's these certain events that can come and that can happen, like the UK abolishing the non-dom regime, that forces you to sit down and say, okay, we need to probably change some of our existing structure. We may need to look at additional structures like insurance-based PPLI solutions. And then if we implement new structures or have to change structures, do they still work in our governance? Or maybe have certain goals completely changed now that a certain jurisdiction may not be as welcoming anymore from a tax point of view. Are we going to stay resident here? Are we looking for a second residency in the future? There's all these options, and I think on one side you should really make sure to look at your plan once a year and see if everything is still on track and aligned with your values. And on the other side, there may be big life events, or someone has passed away. There may be a divorce in the family, or a marriage, someone has joined the family that has large influence. These things need to be considered and revisited in a plan as well.
Right. What are some of these overlooked risks, let's say, in the cross-border estate planning when you look at different domiciles to avoid unnecessary taxable events? What are some of those risks that you all highlight?
There's probably quite a few. I think one of the biggest ones is probably mismatched tax residency and succession laws. You may have families with assets in different countries. The heirs live in different countries, and suddenly you're dealing with forced heirship rules or asset situs issues that no one saw coming. Another one is illiquidity. Families can be very asset rich, but then suddenly when estate taxes or probate costs hit, they struggle to find the cash to pay these obligations, especially if they do not have it, or if they have these things happening in multiple jurisdictions at the same time. I'd also say there's also an exposure at the beneficiary level. So think about divorce, like I said, creditors, or even just public visibility. All these things can all create risks that families haven't planned for. And finally, I'd say people very much or often underestimate how much local treaties or tax rules can clash in an overall plan. A structure that works really well in one country or in one state even may not work in another and even cause a problem there. And that's also where PPLI can really shine, because when it's structured correctly, it can help unify planning across borders, protect against these risks. But of course, only with very careful tailoring and full compliance.
That's great. Let's go back to this cross-border and the globalization of wealth and the interrelationship of families and family offices moving back and forth between Europe and the U.S. So
Mhm.
it would seem like there's a good number of um, let's say first gen or G1 or let's say the true owners of family owned companies in the U.S. I'm seeing more
Mhm.
moving to Europe as a lifestyle, let's say to France or Italy or UK, and also seeking additional citizenship in the EC. Can you talk a bit about that? The globalization, the cross border of wealth of families, especially Americans interested in more of a, let's say, the final chapter of life in Europe, um, even if the children stay in the U.S. Like, how does that affect the movement of wealth becoming European citizen, or even further, like becoming only European citizen?
Yeah, it's definitely a very complex matter if not done correctly. I think whether it's pre-immigration or expatriation, leaving a country or partially moving, I always advise that as a family, you should really sit down with an advisor and an expert in the field and try to plan these things ahead and not just jump into a new jurisdiction. Um, the wine and the estates in France may look great, and they are, but moving to France can have a lot of other side effects, and not just France, right? Because, like we said, in the US, or in generally common law countries, also the UK, you've got very formal structures like trust, like LLCs, comes down to the legal and the tax environment. And it really supports tools and makes it very straightforward to plan certain things. And if you suddenly move a family or a part of the family into continental Europe or civil law countries, this can mess up a lot of the structuring. Certain countries in continental Europe, for example, don't have trusts, or if you come to Switzerland, we don't even have an official trust law, even though you may find trustees here. So depending on where you go, you really need to plan in advance. Okay, where am I going to go? Do my structures work at that place? Do I face forced airship that I have not thought about or considered before? We also see a lot of people moving to the Middle East suddenly or building businesses there. Okay, but it's a Sharia country. So have you thought about the Sharia complexities of it? So it's really about planning in advance as much as you can and being aware of these things. And then sometimes even making sure that you have that dual compliance in the different solutions that you implement.
And you work in a family business yourself, right, or with your family, and so that must be helpful to, in a sense, think of your own dynamics and think of the longevity of family relationships and family businesses. I often like to talk about legacy in this podcast. It's really the core theme overall is the importance of legacy and also the different approaches and mindsets of legacy. So I'd like your own views on legacy relative to a family held business, first of all, and maybe just kind of talk about it more generally in terms of the marketplace and the client's own views on legacy and like what it means to them.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it's always been very natural, right? I've been working with my father um, for over a decade now. So for us, it's always been a very natural process, and we're an extremely good team um, when it comes to working with other families, whether it's on the insurance side or on the governance side. And I think people notice that and they appreciate it. And because they see us working so well in a family, they often ask, okay, how do you do it? And how do you not fight? And we always say it's really about open communication. And I guess when you say what's legacy, I don't think there's one definition of it. Um, it's more, what are you trying to leave behind?
Yeah, exactly. And is it and the balance between the wealth creation and the application of that wealth into life activities? You're kind of a G2. You're kind of a tweener. It seems in terms of the generational eras. Maybe we just talk about next gen for a bit here. But what do you see in Europe, especially evolving in terms of the perspective of legacy for next gens? Let's say, especially the millennials between the late 20s and the late 30s. What are you seeing in terms of their approach to legacy, balancing wealth and lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think legacy, like I said, it's what do you want people to remember for you, right? What values or principles guide you? Whose lives are you touching? What are you building or nurturing that will outlive you? And I think very much the next generation is thinking about that, that you see that they're very climate conscious. There's also a lot of climate conscious investing. Philanthropy is very big and uses it very much as a strategic tool, not necessarily performative like it used to be. And business models are sustainable and inclusive, or at least that's what they're really trying to build. Um, and I think bottom line, the next gens in Europe are daring to ask questions, not just how do we keep things going, but why are we doing all of this, right? So the mindset has shifted and it's redefining both governance and legacy from something inherited to something that they're trying to shape. They don't just want to inherit from their parents, but they want to use maybe part of the inheritance, but they really want to build and shape their own lives and leave something behind.
Great, I like that. You can reach Laura Nanette Gambineri on LinkedIn directly. You can also find her at Trusted Governance LLC, or if you're in Zurich, pop her a line if you're a family office or family health business. And also, she is at the Crown Global Insurance Group, also in Zurich. A wonderful city, beautiful, and a great place to visit. I noticed
You should
also
definitely visit.
yes, I love visiting. I actually was there the week of the Credit Suisse crisis, so there was a lot of movement going around, and the fancy chocolate and restaurant across the street was quite busy. People
Yeah,
were doing lots of meetings and talking and figuring out life, um,
right.
juxtaposed against the stoic Pictet office across the street.
Yeah, I know which one. It's a lovely place.
Yeah, and the hotel they renovated next door, right? I think recently.
Correct. I think the Mandarin Oriental.
Nice.
Yeah.
So on LinkedIn, one last comment here. A couple months ago, you did a post about collaboration and how it's important for professionals to work together within this competitive industry. And I thought that was a really great post. I'd like you to
Thank you.
talk about that briefly, thinking about how you collaborate within the vendor and advisor ecosystem for family offices and family enterprises.
Thank you so much. I'm always glad if these posts resonate with my audience. And you're right. I think collaboration is absolutely foundational, not just in the governance space, but also in the insurance space and really every industry. Um, but on the governance side, I mean, it's not a solo sport, right? It touches governance such as legal frameworks, tax and structuring, family dynamics, emotional legacy, business strategy. These are all very different disciplines, but people should collaborate. So you have lawyers, wealth planners involved, governance advisors, even therapists, and they all need to be in sync with the family and the family values. And people that believe or say that they are a one-stop shop, I always criticize that a little bit because I think there's so much around a family's ecosystem, and you really should be touching all of these disciplines. And it's just something that one person in itself cannot do. So I try to collaborate really across all of these disciplines. We work with legal, with tax, with therapists quite a bit, wealth planners, of course, custodians, asset managers, you name it.
Great, quite a vast ecosystem, especially in in Switzerland, Zug and Geneva and Zurich, of course, Liechtenstein, Vienna. You can just have a business right there alone in those areas, much less all of Europe. So great to have you on today, and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Adam.
I'd like to thank our Family Business Audiocast attendees today, and of course our esteemed guest, Laura Nanette Gambineri. This is Artem Smith signing off. Please stay tuned for the next episode of the Family Business Audiocast available live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and X.